So I gotta wait till Tuesday, okay. Oh my God, I just need to keep hearing that right there. Hey, you are awesomely awesome. And you're the best. You're the best, blessed. Just hell. I can't even sound, even know what to say.
Had a vision for 20 in the morning, thinking of my little sister said morning. Struggling with realities, no maladies. Holidays ain't the same, everything's changed. No Bowie, no Prince, and no Michael, no Andre Crouch and the Disciples, no Walter and Winter, typical me, no Whitney, no George Michael. Toys R Us gone bankrupt. Damn, the Guitar City went bankrupt. Everything from my childhood's missing, man. Man, I swear such a fucked up feeling, man. I'm not mad, it's a simple observation. And I'm not sad, but it's not a celebration. I'm just trying to put the pieces back together, man. Everything's falling through my fingers like sand. It seems tighter that I'm gripping. It seems more that I am slipping. I feel like I lost everything I love. Where's this legend of God be loved? And churches ain't the same. Gospel music just ain't the same. R&B it just ain't the same. But y'all keep telling me it's the same. But I ain't feeling nothing, damn it. And I don't wanna reach up and grab it. Shots fired, get to ducking. Always knew they were up to something. This ain't no future, bring it frontin'. And y'all know you still have it, fool. I'm not a baby, bro, I'm grown. Don't leave me standing out here alone. That's why I wrote this song. Because I know I'm not alone. What are we out here doing? What are we out here saying? People don't care no more. So fuck it, I don't care no more. This is too much for you to handle. I was always too much to handle. There ain't nothing new about me. You don't want authenticity. You don't want sincerity. 2020 brought me clarity. Now I see who you really are. No mask wearing, mailbox record, racist motherfucker. Let's go. Homie, you don't really want it. Sis, you don't really want it. I'm your nightmare opponent. Walking in a new anointing. Walking past all your bullets. Nothing in the trigger bullet. Try and pull it again. No weapon missed again. Tired of talking about changes. Tired of going through changes. Lie after lie. Lie after lie. Republican the team. Took a bullet for the dream that we would one day all be free. Free from prejudice, free from sexism, free from bigotry. I die for creativity, I die for freedom to be free. I died and left a legacy. Oh, but baby, I still live through technology. After the sun, comes the rain. And after the storm, the sun will start shining. What is the pain? And tears of pain. And tears of pain. And a dash of struggle, just be patient. Your destiny will manifest. Yes, force and resist.
What's going on, y'all? Y'all give me like another minute or so, and then we're going to go ahead and get into the live. I ask that you please share the live. Share. Please share. Okay, that's the most important thing you can do right now besides liking, is sharing the video. Okay, this live is not meant to be fear-mongering, which means that I'm going to sit up here and have y'all afraid without any sort of solution. But the only way we're going to get through this, y'all, like the song said in the beginning, girl, freedom from your religion, your European religion, your mass decisions, we're going to have to face the fear, the one thing that those motherfuckers are afraid to do. So give me 1 second, I'll be right back. Shout out to King Aries in the building. Please make sure y'all share and like. Give me 1 second. All right, sorry about that, y'all. What's going on? Listen, this is not going to be a visual live. If y'all want to hear about my if y'all want to see my visuals, my most recent visuals, you can check out the video I uploaded last night dropped, shall I say, called Wonderfully Made. It is chapter 1 about my youth. Okay? Then we had a live afterwards. All right, so you can go ahead and definitely check that out. But on tonight's live, we're going to go back down memory lane. History repeats itself because people are afraid to learn. And yes, as a human being, fear is scary. Fear has the power to be able to hold people back from doing the right thing. And with this live, my attempt is going to help queer people to face the fear of what is ahead of us. Because if we know what is going to happen, then we have the opportunity and the ability to change the narrative, to shift the trajectory of the bullshit. I'm going to be very passionate in this live. I'm going to be saying all type of colorful language in this live. If that is something that you cannot get down with, then I need you to get the fuck on somewhere. Because this is for people who are willing to face the truth, the objective truth. Now, before we get into the live, we got to be smart about things, as always. Boom. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. All the videos, songs, images, and graphics used in this live belong to their respective owners, and BubzDaGawd does not claim any right over them. So that we done got that the fuck on out the way. For those of you who tuned into the live last night, I had stated that I had been watching some documentaries as of late. A lot of them revolving around the bullshit that is happening in this country. A lot of the language that is being used by the people in power now. The same methodologies that they used is the same methodology that was used by Nazis during the Nazi regime in Germany. And the way that they were able to accomplish what they have accomplished is because they did it in very small increment type of ways, very slowly. We're going to be listening to 3 videos from a YouTube channel called Making Gay History Podcast. I ask that if you are a queer person or a person who cares, who is a part of the global citizenry of humanity, I ask that you please not only subscribe to them, but also help them to reach a goal. They had an anonymous donor say that they would give them a $25,000 grant, but they have to come up with $25,000, which means in total they would have $50,000. So if you have anything that you could share, I would rather you share it with them as opposed to giving me the cash app in this regard, because those individuals are preserving queer history. You know, the same history that the people that are in power now want to remove. And the reason they want it removed is because those individuals and their bullshit is all the way wrapped up and intertwined in a lot of queer people's stories. So we're going to take a listen to the Nazi regime and what happened to the queer people during the Nazi regime. We're going to start off, first of all, with the intro of it. How, again, as the title reads, they start with taking away your rights. Then they create the narrative about you being this evil, monstrous, demonic-ass creature that needs to be healed, that needs to be saved, that needs to be delivered. And the motherfuckers saying that shit have no power to, let alone deliver themselves. What's up, Queen Spicy? What's going on? Babe, I can show you better than I can tell you. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into this. This live is going to be pretty lengthy, maybe 2 hours or some change, because the video alone, the 3 videos that I have, okay, is going to be like an hour and 20-something minutes. So listen to this while you're doing something else. I want to talk to your subconscious mind, because that's where the power is. That's where the answer is. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. I introduce to you Making Gay History Podcast own series, The Nazi Era. And I want y'all to listen, because a lot of things that are going to be said in that video compilation that I created, putting them all together, a lot of the lingo sounds very eerily similar to the lingo we hear today.
I'm Eric Marcus, and this is Making Gay History.
Make sure y'all like and share, please. Like and share. I'm gonna need y'all to like and share this year. Come on.
It's January 1980. I'm on winter break from my final semester at Vassar College, and I'm sitting in a darkened Broadway theater watching two exhausted-looking young men carry large rocks back and forth across the stage. They don't touch, don't even look at each other, but they're falling in love. Two gay concentration camp inmates persecuted by the Nazis because of who they are. The play is Bent by Martin Sherman. The setting is Dachau. I don't have to work hard to imagine Dachau. My memories of visiting the former concentration camp during a trip the previous summer are fresh in my mind. But seeing the story of people like me, who are caught in the jaws of the Nazi regime brought to life on stage, with all of its senseless brutality and humiliation, makes my blood run cold and leaves an indelible mark. I wasn't new to the Holocaust. I grew up in Kew Gardens, a New York City neighborhood where many persecuted Jews had settled, refugees from before World War II and survivors of the Holocaust. One of my chores when I was a kid, and first allowed to cross the street on my own, was to buy the Sunday newspapers at a candy store on Metropolitan Avenue. It was run by Ziggy, an old man with an Eastern European accent, who usually gave me a free pretzel to go along with the papers. He had numbers tattooed on his forearm, and when I asked my father about the tattoo, he explained where Ziggy got it. After that, I was on the lookout for other concentration camp tattoos, and I didn't have to look far to find them, on the arms of neighbors and some of my friends' parents, too. By the time I first visited Dachau, I'd been swimming in Holocaust history for years. I'd read about it in history books and the Diary of Anne Frank, and I'd watched the archival newsreels and documentaries that have become standard fare for anyone interested in the subject. But until I saw Bent, I'd been almost entirely unaware of the persecution of homosexuals during the years of the Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. If history books mentioned it at all, it was usually just an aside. It wasn't until 6 years after I saw the play that the first comprehensive English-language book about the fate of gay people in Nazi Germany was published. It was called The Pink Triangle by Richard Plant, a gay German refugee. And when I began working on my Making Gay History book in 1988, I made a point of interviewing him, even though World War II was outside the scope of my book. But the subject never lost its grip on me, and when we launched the Making Gay History podcast, I had it in the back of my mind that we should one day produce a season about the Nazi era. Because to this day, the topic remains underexplored and poorly understood.
But guess what? Going forward, Americans, unfortunately, are about to experience what the fuck that shit was like.
Reduced to the visual of an inverted pink triangle on a striped concentration camp uniform. I wanted us to tell in greater depth the story of the men who were persecuted for their homosexuality, and to describe the danger that others across the LGBTQ spectrum, as we currently understand that term, found themselves in after the Nazis came to power. And I also wanted to explore the experiences of queer people who were persecuted for reasons other than their sexuality, as well as those who risked their lives to save others.
So that's everybody.
We sifted through the vast oral history repositories of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, the USC Shoah Foundation, and the Fortunoff Video Archive, scoured smaller archives at home and abroad, tracked down documentary footage, and after a year of intensive research, we're proud to present our series on the experiences of LGBTQ people during the rise of the Nazi regime, World War II, and the Holocaust. It begins with 2 episodes that draw on recorded and written testimony from multiple people to lay out the historical background. And then we'll share 8 individual profile episodes based on oral histories, some of them voiced by actors in English translation. You'll hear from people like Pierre Selle, a Frenchman persecuted for being gay.
Now,
when I see the scene again, if I have to describe it in detail, the most terrible thing was maybe not the assault itself, it was the blood everywhere. On the papers, the tables, there was blood everywhere like in a butcher's shop. And the screaming, still the Nazis shouting, and our own cries too. The cries of pain and suffering, because you have people who can suffer in silence, who put their hand in their mouth to keep quiet, accept the suffering. And then there are others, me, I screamed. I screamed as if my throat was being slit.
You'll also hear from Frida Belinfanta, a Dutch lesbian resistance fighter.
For 3 months, I was disguised as a man, and a friend of mine had the same figure, the same height, and I had a 3-piece suit that fit me to a T. And I went out for the first time in my disguise, and I went to get a haircut right away. I went into the barber shop and took my hat off and put it on the hook. And the barber walks up to me and he said, "What do you want, sir? Shave or haircut?" And I said, "No, just haircut." And he didn't. Bat an eye.
And Lucy Solani, an Italian trans woman who ended up in Dachau after deserting the German army.
È solo che c'è una guardia che prende un pezzo di pane bianco.
There was a guard who would take a piece of white bread, cut off a slice, remove the crust, and put the butter on, right in front of us, we who were so hungry. Then he would take the crust of bread and toss it next to him. One guy, I think he was Polish, he got up from his work and threw himself at the crusts and put them in his mouth. The guard was holding his bread knife. Luckily, the guy turned, or he would have been gutted. Instead, the guard stabbed him in his butt cheek. So much blood, and the guard started laughing. The cut got infected, but the guy still had to come to work.
The stories you'll hear this season are shocking and upsetting, but we owe it to the people who had the courage to share them, to bear witness to their suffering, their fortitude, their survival, and their will to live on.
Let me tell y'all something. For people who sit up here and act as if though that this cannot happen in America, that this will never happen in America, we just seen what the majority of Americans think. And the scary and fucked up part about this whole situation is that the individuals who made the wrong choice, because it's obviously a wrong choice, that instead of them building reconciliation, being able to stand in accountability and say, you know what? I was wrong for making this quote unquote choice to put this person in office. To manifest language and laws and actions that brought forth the Nazi era. Instead of them doing that, they will fight to the bitter end, even if it means consuming them as well, because they're too egoic to walk in the truth. And yes, like it's just stated, the stories you will hear will be very upsetting and horrendous. Which is why during this entire live, I'm going to speak with so much motherfucking passion in my motherfucking voice. Because the same people who told us that this shit like this was not going to happen, that we're fear-mongering, that we're the ones that are the problem, bitch, we are the ones that did the motherfucking research. We didn't just listen to a 60-second clip, bitch. We did the fucking research. And there are other people out there who also have done the research far greater than me. But I also understand, looking at things from the human perspective, a lot of motherfuckers don't understand until they finally find out. Yeah, we're in the fuck around and find out era in this bitch today. Now you're gonna have to make a choice. Ain't gonna be no riding on the fence. Either you are on the side of objective truth or you aren't. Either you're on the side of love or you're not. And as much as I want to have grace and mercy for people who voted for this shit, You can only have grace and mercy for individuals who are willing to have grace and mercy with your ass. And America showed how much grace and mercy they have for the queer community, for the black community, for women's community, and for the people of color's community. All these fucking executive orders that have been signed, and the removal of people from Senate, from Congress, to install loyalists, to believe whatever the fuck they want to believe. And I don't know if y'all heard about some of the individuals that sit on the bench, the seat for the Department of Justice were locked out of a government building, told they couldn't come in, and then told that the Department of Justice doesn't even exist anymore. And no shade. A lot of this shit is going to happen is because we're going to allow it through fear. So yes, queer people and black people and people of color and women, it's time to start having those very scary conversations. Yeah, those scary conversations about your mortality. And once you work through the motherfucking motions of the fear that's going to come with facing your mortality, there is another side where you're going to find your power and your strength to where can't never bitch ever take away your power. These weak ass hoes want to take your life because they have no life. That's why these weak ass hoes hoard all this money and this power and want to control everything because they fail to control things in their life. And the beautiful thing about being in this era, even though it's about to shit finna hit the fucking fan, and I'm talking about motherfucking IBS, motherfucking Indian food with a little bit of fucking a laxative in that bitch. When it hits the fan, baby, it's gonna be a bloody brown mess. A muddy brown mess for everybody because karma is stepping into the chat. And for those individuals who are rich and wealthy and powerful and want all this shit to happen, I want you to understand, bitch, whether you believe or not, God, source, universe, consciousness sees every motherfucking thing. Baby, y'all better get prepared.
Listen. As we see the rise of anti-LGBTQ activism, anti-Semitism, and hatred here at home. This special series on the experiences of LGBTQ people during the rise of the Nazi regime, World War II, and the Holocaust is a production of Making Gay History in partnership with the Fortunoff Video Archive for Holocaust Testimonies at Yale University.
Come on, Yale.
It's produced by Inga Dataya, Nahani Rouse, and
hey,
me,
Queen Stevie.
Eric Marcus. It's made possible thanks to the ongoing support of the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, the Calamus Foundation, and Christopher Street Financial. Additional funding for this season was provided by the Reuben and Gloria Feldman Family Educational Institute, the Ziegler Family Fund, David Carollo, Eric Lee, and Ty Ashford and Nicholas Jitkoff. We're also grateful for the generous contributions of Mary Cadigan and Lee Wilson, Kathy Dancer, Michael Longacre, the Marcus Family Foundation, Rob Marchand, Christine and Brian White, the Embry Family Foundation, Rick Hoffman, and Lisa Malakowski, who made a donation in support of this series in honor of our fellow Vassar grad, the late legendary activist, Urvashi Vad. Many thanks to Labas Siju Suive for the Pierre Cell clip, to the Jeff and Toby Her Oral History Archive at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. for the Frida Bell'Infanta footage, and to Blue Mirror, Chimera Film, and True Colors for the Lucy Solani footage. I'm Eric.
And you see how all those people donated? That also reminds me and wants me to let y'all know and remind y'all that community is also going to come from this shit. Because no shade, I think we as people got too fucking comfortable in the land of the oppressor as if though everything is okay when those motherfuckers have been seething at the mouth just in a very covert type of way. And now that they have the opportunity to be overt, It's like they want to demonize us, but then walk in our shoes and our likeness once it's their turn. It's like they want to keep us in the dark and prevent us from rising just so they can rise. But like I said, now that shit's hitting the fan and the fire is cranked up in this mug, yeah, community, real community is going to be birthed from this. Real activism is going to be birthed from this. And I'm going to tell it to you like this. When it come down to our self-defense, you better become vicious as fuck when it comes to protecting you. Don't let these little dick-ass motherfuckers put their hands on you and try to harm you, bitch, and you don't do a damn thing. You better stab a bitch in the eye. You better crush a bitch windpipe. You better punch a bitch in their spleen. You better river dance and Vogue fucking death drop on a nigga nuts 12 times. You better turn a human being into a bipedal ass motherfucker girl and kick their kneecap in, bitch. Turn them into dinosaurs in this motherfucker. And as y'all already learned from my chapter 1, I was bullied a lot. Motherfuckers putting their hands on me. As an adult, I wish a motherfucker would. I still got a lot of trauma that I need to work out inside myself. May God bless the motherfucker that fuck with me. And I'll put that on every damn thing. And I need for y'all to be as infuriated as I am. Because these people are playing in our fucking faces. And not playing. They're going to do shit. And they're expecting for you to not to do anything. Gag them hoes. It will be the era of being gagged. Everybody will be gagged. Girl, I want to go to fuck in, bitch. I just want to go to fuck in. Queen Stevie said, listen, y'all seen the video of those neo-Nazi group getting ran off by our people, black people, so they better not want to, period. Exactly. That mean all them trapping ass niggas, all those gang banging ass niggas, all them young ninja niggas, all them niggas with the motherfucking stick and the extendo and the motherfucking got a chopper in the car in the trunk. It's time for y'all motherfuckers to stand the fuck up and do some real shit. Stop whooping ass in this bitch. Black people have been too peaceful. And y'all think every fucking generation finna come in this bitch and be peaceful while y'all motherfuckers do shit to us? What type of narcissistic shit is this?
Marcus. Until next time.
Girl. I told y'all, people, y'all ain't gonna learn till y'all find out. Let me skip a little bit. There we go.
To get the $25,000 grant.
Make sure y'all subscribe to them really for the $25,000 grant. Now, this is the second video. Now, look at the picture, y'all. See the Nazis over there burning all this type of shit? That's what they want to do to us. What's up, King Nereus? What's going on? That's what they want to do. They want to do to us. They want to take our likeness, our image that we created. Because they realize their falsified, bullshit ass Christian version of our lives, they couldn't prove it. Just like they can't prove any of the miraculous shit that happened in the book. Because none of these hoes is out here doing real Christ shit. The fact that queer people are rising on their own accord. With their own merit, with their own gifts and their own talents. They're jealous. Because some of us survived the onslaught. And some of us gonna survive this one, bitch. Because after these next 4 years, bitch, it's going to be a lot of I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry in this motherfucker, girl. Because at this point, black people, we ain't saving nobody. Queer people, we ain't saving nobody. Women, saving nobody. People of color saving nobody. The motherfuckers that didn't learn when they had the opportunity to learn and was bullshitting out of fear, guess what, bitch? Now you got to figure it out on your own in the midst of the moment. In the midst of the chaos, bitch. Hope you listening. Because some of you niggas will never ever be able to talk to me. Because like I said, for some of you niggas, it's straight up motherfucking smoke, bitch. If you want to talk to me and learn some shit after your ass chose the bullshit that happened, you can go through my motherfucking archives. I don't get to waste my breath on some of you niggas. But let's continue with part 2 in this bitch.
There was one evening when I think my mother had gone to bed and I went out for a stroll. And that somebody else was strolling and I wanted to make contact. I thought he was interested in making contact too.
It was 1936, and Bertram Schaffner was out cruising in Berlin. He was an American in his mid-20s, and he and his German-born mother were visiting Germany 3 years into the Nazis' reign. She was trying to persuade her Jewish relatives to get out of the country. When a man caught Schaffner's eye that night, Schaffner sensed that something was wrong.
Then I became aware that there was something very uncomfortable about it for him, which I didn't understand. And he managed to speak to me and ascertain what I was interested in. But he said, you know, it's extremely dangerous for us to be seen talking because everybody is watched. And if you cannot prove that you knew each other before, that you stopped and talked to each other for a valid reason, then you're in trouble. And if you have stopped to talk to each other because of a sexual reason, then you're immediately subject to arrest. And he said, please don't, please sort of, let's separate now. You go your way and I'll go mine.
I'm Eric Marcus, and this is Making Gay History, the Nazi Era. If the plague of homosexuality goes unchecked, it will spell the end of Germany. That was the message Nazi leader Heinrich Himmler delivered to an audience of SS officers.
Doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound familiar? If there's too many gays, if the gays get out of control, girl, it ain't gonna be no more life. The same shit we've been hearing for years. But in this instance, they finally get to manifest their fears and then decide to be the ones that are going to solve it.
4 years after Adolf Hitler came to power in January 1933. By Himmler's estimate, up to 10% of Germany's men were homosexual. That was 2 million men shirking their responsibility to procreate, to grow the population of a nation intent on reclaiming its global standing after World War I. And male homosexuality undermined Germany in other ways, Himmler said. Gay men posed a political threat. They were loose-lipped moral degenerates who were loyal to their own kind rather than the state, a charge that had long been leveled against the Jews as well. They were pathological liars, mentally ill. It was unfortunate, really, he said, that they could no longer be dispatched as they had been in ancient times.
Girl, did we not show videos of white motherfuckers talking about, well, you ain't gotta believe our faith, but we can force you? Did we not see videos of motherfuckers talking about Leviticus 20? I think it's verse 13, if I'm not mistaken, about how gays should be surely be put to death. And wasn't this election won through fear, and one of the elements of fear dealing with inclusivity? and equality and equity was the trans agenda? Let them call it, let them say it.
By drowning in a bog, a course of action he called, quote, not a punishment, but simply the eradication of abnormal life. By the time Himmler delivered his speech, the Nazi state had devised its own, more sophisticated methods to try to contain the homosexual contagion. The Nazi savagery ultimately led to the deaths of thousands of gay men, the worst massacre of gay people in modern history. Tens of thousands of queer lives were shattered. In this episode, we'll hear how a draconian anti-gay law and the vast powers of the Nazi police state were wielded ruthlessly to arrest, terrorize, torture, and imprison suspected homosexuals. And we'll draw on archival excerpts to explore how gay men, lesbians, trans people, and gay Jews experience persecution differently. We begin with my own decades-old interview with a gay German-Jewish immigrant.
Okay, hello. Yep, I'm here. Interview with Richard Plant on May 14th, 1989, New York City. You came to New York in what year then?
I came to America in 1938, May 1938.
Uh-huh. And did you move to Manhattan when you first got
Yeah,
there?
I moved to Manhattan, yeah, for the first couple of years. I did nothing but learn English. That was my main occupation in those days.
Richard Plant had left Germany shortly after the Nazis came to power. He completed his studies in Switzerland before immigrating to New York City. That's where I spoke with him at his tidy, compact apartment on the top floor of a Greenwich Village row house. In 1986, Plant published The Pink Triangle, The Nazi War Against Homosexuals. It was the first in-depth English-language book about the persecution of gay people in Nazi Germany, a subject he'd discovered precious few knew anything about.
Even my gay friends didn't know about it.
Didn't know about
the persecution of the gays? No, nobody knew. The official press depicted the Nazis as homosexuals. That explained their viciousness.
Right.
There was a book by a Jewish man who said that the reason for anti-Semitism is homosexuality.
Oh.
Sure. They all joined, from the Hasidics to the Catholic Church and back. That explained the viciousness. They were all homosexuals.
Plant grew up during the interwar Weimar years, a relatively liberal time when queer subcultures thrived in Germany's cities, and when LGBTQ rights advocate and sexologist Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld founded his internationally renowned Institute for Sexual Science.
Were you aware when you what danger your friends were in Germany?
I didn't know the extent of the gay persecution and the extent of the Jewish persecution.
Until later.
But I had an idea.
Right.
Because Hirschfeld Institute was burned in 1933.
Do you recall what happened to it? Do you remember the Hirschfeld Institute being destroyed, or is that not news?
The Swiss papers reported it. And the Swiss papers printed things which the German press couldn't print anymore because they were being coordinated. But none of us could see the size of this, how big it would get. Neither the Jews nor the gays had any idea what was going to happen.
No one knew how big it would get. But the first signs of repression came soon after Hitler was appointed chancellor.
Listen, the first signs of oppression, listen.
Gay rights organizations were forced to disband, queer publications were branded indecent and outlawed, and many gay and lesbian bars were ordered shut. Nazi students destroyed Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute for Sexual Science. Its archives and library went up in flames during the Nazi book burnings. Still, many LGBTQ people initially underestimated the Nazi threat. They had good reason to.
You hear that? They undermined the threat. Oh, don't worry about it. It's all right, girl. Undermined it.
Ernst Röhm, the chief of the SA, the Nazi stormtroopers, was widely known to be gay, and he was a close Hitler ally. But then, on June 30th, 1934, Hitler ordered the execution of Röhm and the rest of the SA leadership. It came to be known as the Night of the Long Knives. Röhm's murder was really about a power struggle. Hitler suspected Röhm of plotting against him, but he used Röhm's homosexuality to justify the assassination and publicly vowed to purge the Nazi ranks of homosexuals.
Now, for you niggas out there that voted for Trump, you slew-footed bastards that voted for Trump, who thought that Trump ass is gonna give you niggas a fucking overseer position, understand that you bastards are expendable as well. Ain't it funny how history repeats itself for you Uncle Ruckus motherfuckers? And I know some of y'all listening with y'all buckets of KFC.
It was an effective piece of anti-gay propaganda that reinforced prejudices already held by ordinary Germans. Later that year, the Nazis stepped up raids on queer meeting places. Hundreds of men were rounded up, interrogated, beaten into revealing names and networks.
Wow.
Scores were jailed or imprisoned in the Nazis' first concentration camps. In a 1935 letter, Richard Plant's friend, Erich Langer, wrote about Röhm's murder and what happened next.
Before I come to what has happened to some of our acquaintances, here is some news not published by anybody in Frankfurt. Have you heard about the Röhm murders? With that, it started, the rounding up, the closing of the bars, and so on. No place is open here in Frankfurt. Remember the Gigi brothers? Arrested a week ago, put into Preungesheim jail. Remember Max? Supposedly in Dachau, near Munich. What little contact I had with Ferdi is lost, but I'm afraid his SA uniform has no protection with Röhm gone. The few he seduced on his endless expeditions would rat on him quickly. You remember Bert? You will not believe it. He joined the SS gang, displays his elegant penmanship in their main office, and looks the other way when he spots me. Richard, you could never guess how many told on their former friends when they were thrown in jail and re-educated by the bullies.
Wow.
Kurt von Ruffin spent 9 months in the Lichtenberg concentration camp in the early days of Hitler's reign. He said in a documentary interview that he had to wear a yellow band with the letter A for the German word for assfucker. Wow. He also described the particular suffering of prisoners he referred to as transvestites, who were brought in dressed in women's clothes, stripped naked, humiliated, and beaten. Concentration camp prisoners had no legal recourse. The Gestapo, the Nazi secret police force, operated without legal oversight.
Doesn't it sound like there's a particular person that wants to give police immunity? Didn't we just see an individual pardon individuals who did some illegal shit? Like storming a government building? You can't make this up, people. Like, wake up, wake up, wake up. I know they demonizing wokeness, girl, but I understand why people want to remain asleep, because being woke is too scared, especially in this shit. But bitch, when you woke, you have choices now. And not everybody gotta die, bitch. We can bring up Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all them niggas and shout out to them for they gave their life. But it's some motherfuckers who went through hell and back, bitch, who had boss ass shit going on, girl, that was willing to whoop other motherfuckers' asses, girl, just to make shit work by the name of, I'm about to say Rosa Parks, by the name of Harriet Tubman, who played no Hostro games and went to hell and back again and again and again and again and wished a motherfucker would.
They could take people into so-called protective custody for an indefinite period of time without going through the court system.
Wow.
But it wasn't long before the Nazis turned the law and the courts into powerful tools of persecution as well. In 1935, they strengthened Paragraph 175, an anti-sodomy law that had been part of the German criminal code for decades. Up until then, it was narrowly interpreted and the number of convictions was limited. Under the stricter Nazi version, prison sentences could be handed down for any indecency between men. And even a whisper of suspicion or a perceived intention toward homosexual activity, a look, a smile, a touch, could get you arrested.
And that also means you heterosexual niggas too. You heterosexual niggas that be playing like y'all gay and shit, and y'all want to show y'all ass and shit and being funny and grabbing your friend's dick and shit like that and humping on him and making all these gay ass noises and shit like that. That means you motherfuckers too. Didn't T.S. Madison tell you that transphobia affects all women and queerphobia affects every damn body? Because now it's not down to what actually makes you queer. In the essence of it all, it's about the societal bullshit and the rigid way of being that is going to dictate who is gay or not. And baby, y'all already set the fucking scene, girl. You can't even wipe your ass without it being gay. So it's going, so what? In order for me not to be gay or to prove that I'm not gay, I gotta walk around with a shitty ass?
Paragraph 175 was most zealously enforced in the years leading up to the war. To hunt down gay men, the Gestapo made use of pink lists, lists of known or suspected homosexuals that were compiled by local police long before the Nazi era.
Girl, I'm probably gonna be on the list,
Arrests
bitch.
soared and tens of thousands of men were sent to prison. Possessions seized during house searches, address books, letters, an affectionate note scribbled on the back of a photo, produced more leads as the scope of the crackdown grew. Michael Ritterman, an Austrian actor, was in his late 20s when his address book was confiscated.
I came home one night and my stepmother told me that the Gestapo had called. And as I was out, they said, fine, we'll come back tomorrow morning, which indeed they did. And there was a house search in my room, and in my writing desk, they found an address book, which they took with them, and then I was taken to the Gestapo headquarters, where I was interrogated by these Gestapo men in a way which I would, in hindsight, say was perfectly correct and acceptable. But when the interrogation at the Gestapo was over, I was taken to a police prison, where I found myself together with two other chaps in the cell. And during the first night there, I was taken into a room in the cellar where there were, I would say, I'm not certain about the actual number, but I would say about 10 men, and each of them held a stick very much heavier than my walking stick. And they had my address book in their hands, there's one after the other. I had to stand to attention in front of each one, had to undress, and then they opened my address book and said, who is this man? So I said, I'm very sorry, I can't tell you. And this interrogation went on from man to man, accompanied each time by a desperate blow with that heavy stick. Now, eventually, and there is a blank now in my mind, I came to on the floor of the cell, which you may know or may not know, is never in complete darkness during the night. There's always a little lamp hanging down, so there is a sort of semi-light. And when I came to, I thought, how extraordinary. Somebody must have poured honey over my face. And I did this.
Wiped his face.
And looked at my hand and realized that it was covered in blood.
Wow.
So, of course, my first reaction when I got over the immediate shock was that my face had been bashed in. And I thought, what's going to happen to my future? I can't work in the theater with a monstrously disfigured face. So time went by, not many weeks, until I was called out of my cell and taken to the ground floor where this same gentleman who interrogated me waited for me and said, I have good news for you. You are free. But don't run away. Wait for official information by letter that the case against you, because of lack of evidence, is closed.
Ritterman knew better than to stick around and risk what might come next. He fled the country. Paragraph 175 did not apply to lesbians. The Nazis viewed same-sex desire in women as less permanent.
What?
And unlike gay men, lesbians weren't a political threat to the state because women didn't hold positions of power.
Wow.
But the Nazis had other tools to go after people who deviated from the norm. Even though there was no specific law for the systematic persecution of lesbians, they were still in very real danger. Statutes that covered sex with dependents, prostitution, abortion, or seduction of minors could be used as pretexts to go after women who attracted the authorities' notice. Trans and gender nonconforming people could be charged under Germany's public indecency law, paragraph 183, for wearing clothing that didn't match their legally assigned gender.
Remember, the only genders, baby, that they recognize. Remember, do y'all hear the semblance in this? Oh, but baby, we're not just going to talk about the semblance, because unfortunately in this situation, there was a process they went through, and we saw through history what that process looks like. We're in the beginning stages of this shit. Again, like the title says, they start with taking away your rights.
Once people were under investigation, their lives could be scrutinized for other offenses against the Nazi state. And it wasn't just the scrutiny of the authorities that posed a threat to LGBTQ people. Many ordinary German citizens were complicit in their persecution and were all too eager to inform on those who didn't toe the heterosexual or gender-conforming line. People outside the norm were vulnerable to denunciation or blackmail by acquaintances or strangers. Denunciations were at the root of an estimated third of paragraph 175 cases during the Nazi era. Ralph Hirschberg, a gay Jew, was the target of just such a blackmail threat. He tells the story to Dr. Klaus Müller.
I started getting letter, you dirty Jew, we know you are homosexual, and so on and so forth, you better look out, and but we get you, and blah, blah, blah. I was very excited, and my mother said, that's stupid. I said, don't say such nonsense. These guys are liable to do everything or anything. So I went to my lawyer. He said, Ralphie, don't be afraid. These are beginners. They don't even know that simply lousy Nazi youngsters. They want to make money and think they can oppress you. That's it. But anyway, so my friend says, you know what? I think it's the time we are leaving.
So how did you feel as a homosexual in these years between 33 and 37?
As like a stranger, to tell you the truth. Because I was born in Berlin, right? And I was a Berliner. But when the Nazis came, you had the feeling you are a stranger, all of a sudden.
In this climate of fear, maintaining a low profile was crucial to staying out of trouble. Lesbians grew their hair long, feminine-presenting gay men tried to adopt a more masculine bearing, same-sex couples moved into separate homes, and some gay men and lesbians married each other in order to pass as straight. For LGBTQ people who were deemed Aryan, avoiding notice or trying to earn a living sometimes meant working in the service of the state that persecuted them. Some conformed to the demands of Nazi ideology, like Ruth Röhlig, a lesbian author who had published a guide to Berlin's lesbian clubs, with a prologue by Dr. Hirschfeld, no less. Once the Nazis took over, they required all German writers to join the Reich Chamber of Culture if they wanted to keep working. Röhlig signed up, and she even went on to write an anti-Semitic novel. Whether out of conviction or opportunism, we don't know. But we do know that while the Nazis were in power, Röhlig was able to live with her girlfriend and continue to work. Many gay men, even men who'd been convicted under paragraph 175, enlisted in the German military. That's what Richard Plant's friend Eric Langer did.
Your friend Eric was still in Germany.
Yeah, my friend Eric joined the Navy, and many of the gays joined the Army and the Navy, but many didn't, and they thought they could pass by. Many managed to pass, like, you know, some very light-skinned Negroes passed.
That part's spicy.
It's really like that. And as I said in my book, you cannot it's not in your passport that you're gay. It's in your passport that you're Jewish or Catholic or Protestant one. As a baby, you are not classified yet.
In the eyes of the Nazis...
Before they go forward, I want to read these comments real quick. Queen Spicy says, complicity is equally violent, low-key. Exactly. Exactly. And the way you make people complicit is that you force them to through fear. That's why I be telling y'all the only way you're going to really have your power is to face your mortality. Them times where I was saying for you to have an ego death, think about death. You're going to die one day. Think about it. And once you work through that whole initial fear aspect and the hyperventilation and all that shit, when you come back to reality, you will be stronger than before to where it don't matter what a motherfucker does to you, bitch. That you will be able to walk in your truth. Because the thing they want to do is they want apathy. They want us to be tired. They want us to give up. They want us to be shrouded in fear. They want to get their rocks off by doing horrendous, horrible shit to us while laughing in our faces. As if though we can't do nothing about it. At least take one of those motherfuckers out. So that the individuals doing this shit will see that, oh wow, there is some power there. And it's more of us than it is of them. I wish I would realize that. Queen Stevie said the goal of Republicans, especially for the Trump party, first distract, second destroy, 3 divide. She also says absolutely spicy, and by them being silent about it, lets us know that they agree with it. Again, for fighting fascism, you do not bend the knee. You do not fold or cower in fear. And the thing about us that survived our onslaught, we already know what that fear looked like. That's why I said as adults, it's going to be an entirely different motherfucking ball game. No shade.
Being Jewish was a far greater offense than being gay. And that information was captured in all kinds of paper records that could ultimately send them to their deaths once the Nazis put their genocidal plans into action. The persecution of queer people wasn't uniform. Their fate depended on factors beyond sexual orientation. Political leanings, social class, ability to blend in, and above all, racial status.
Wow.
They were also the whims of the authorities. In one instance, a trans man from Berlin, identified as GW, was investigated by the police but sent home without being charged. As long as he passed and didn't cause public offense, he was allowed to go about his life.
Wow.
For Liddy Bachroff, there was no leniency. Bachroff was born in southwestern Germany in 1908. At 21, she started living full-time as a woman and settled in Hamburg, where she found a community of fellow sex workers who practiced their profession in the city's red light district. Bachroff identified as a transvestite, a term that's now generally considered offensive, but at the time, it was close to our present-day understanding of the word transgender. That's not how the authorities saw her. She was convicted several times as a gay cisgender man under paragraph 175, even before the law was strengthened by the Nazis. But harassment and convictions didn't compel Bachroff to leave her adopted home, as she wrote while in custody in 1931.
It has now been 2 years, and I can't leave Hamburg, the Reeperbahn, the singular district of St. Pauli. Here I have everything I once longed for, and that's now been fulfilled. I have good friends or fleeting acquaintances of the night. They come and go. Some who know me as a transvestite, and others who address me as a harlot, like every other on our street. For 1.5 years now, I've had a steady boyfriend. I know that we love and understand each other, but I also know that one day this love will come to a sudden and unexpected end. That I will, at some unknown hour, leave him. Him who I still sincerely love today. I don't know if that's because of my nature, but I feel I can't be held responsible for that. I am so terribly indifferent to everything. I'm drifting with the current of the world and of the people who are all, today, more or less fighting for their existence. And somewhere in this world, without much fuss being made about it, I will end too. But when that moment arrives, I will not utter any complaints, for I have lived according to my nature.
living according to her nature became increasingly perilous after the revision of paragraph 175, especially because that revision also included a new section, 175A. It took aim at homosexual behaviors that were considered especially heinous, including sex deemed to have a corrupting effect on other men, like prostitution or sex with a subordinate or a man under the age of 21.
What's up, boy crazy?
Behaviors for which both parties could be sentenced for up to 10 years of hard labor. Backhoff was first convicted for prostitution under paragraph 175A in 1936 and served a 2-year prison sentence. When she was arrested again soon after her release, she petitioned the court for so-called voluntary castration. The procedure offered some who were prosecuted under paragraph 175 the possibility of a more lenient sentence or help them avoid being sent to a concentration camp. But Backhoff's motives were considered suspect. The court argued that castration in her case wouldn't offer a cure. It would only make it easier for Backhoff to hide her genitals from her clients and, in having sex with them, quote, entice non-homosexually inclined young people into homosexuality once they notice that he is a man. But a man she was not. That's clear in her writings, which survived in the archives of the institutions that persecuted her. In one of her stories, Backhoff describes an encounter with a client, a steamship radio operator named Rolf, who recognizes in her the woman she knew herself to be.
A handsome young man came up to me and asked me to dance. I noticed the light pressure of his right hand on my back. Several times, without thinking, I looked into his eyes, and as soon as he noticed, a sheepish smile appeared around his lips. Hours passed, we danced even more. We had found each other. Rolf was passionately in love with me. Countless times I heard my name from his lips. Liddy, often like a breath, dreamy, rapturous, awake to the happiness of love. Rolf was a really fine person, extremely decent and caring towards me. Because when we were exposed to the unhealthy, cold, damp air of the rainy break of day, and I was noticeably shivering, he tenderly placed his coat around me and held me tight in his strong male embrace, and I was so unspeakably happy. Rolf saw and loved in me only the feminine. A brief chaste struggle was followed by complete and mutual devotion. Although Rolf silently slipped 20 marks in my purse when we said goodbye 2 hours later, I'm convinced that this experience was free from any harlotry, and from the vices that make up the path that we as transvestites are all more or less forced to travel and live by. Signed, Liddy Backhoff, transvestite.
Backhoff's castration appeal was denied. After another 4 years in prison, she was transferred to the Mauthausen concentration camp, where, in January 1943, she was murdered.
Wow.
In our next episode, the war years and life in the concentration camps.
So we have just listened to part 1 with, again, they start with taking away your rights. They start with trying to revise your story and control your narrative and create this fear narrative around you. Then with episode 2 that we just listened to, as you can see on the screen, they take all of the queer information, publication, and burn it. They create this narrative that queer people are coming after your children, that they're sexual deviants, all these things that we have heard before. And now, with episode 3, we're going to get into the history and the accounts of individuals who unfortunately did not have the resources to escape the country, and what that reality looked like for a lot of them.
This happened in Washington, D.C. The clip of Bertram Schaffner's interview is from the art Eric Marcus. It was mixed and sound designed by Ann Pope.
Okay, you doing
John Carrion. Thank You to Maya Vision Lost is a production of Making Gay History. in partnership
Again,
with the
subscribe
fortunate
to
April
Making
10th.
Gay History, please.
That's how much time we've got to meet a $25,000
They're doing
challenge
a thing for
We had to
$25,000, so
stand.
make sure that y'all
We need to
support
raise
them.
$25,000
Please.
ourselves to
Sorry
get the
for me skimming
$25,000
through. I have to get to
grant.
it.
So we're really counting on you, our listeners, to get us across the finish line. Whether you donate $5, $50, $500, or more, every donation
If
gets
y'all
us that
can,
much
make sure y'all go donate to them.
Please go to Making
And
Gay
if you
History
got a little
org
extra, you can
slash
donate to me at the bottom of the screen.
That's
$BubzDaGawd.
/donate. Thanks so much.
We had to stand, stand all day long in the same spot. Our abdomens hurt so much, a bucket was passed around for our bodily needs.
Walter Schwarze was a German postal service worker from Leipzig. When he was 25 years old, he was denounced for criticizing the war. Then, the Gestapo searched his home. They found letters from Hans, his longtime lover. Schwarze was taken to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp near Berlin.
The winter of 1940-41 was grimly cold. Our pockets were sewn shut. We didn't have gloves. On our feet, we only had rags and wooden shoes. Above us, the crows from the pine forest smelled the dead. When the smoke from the crematorium started to rise, you just kept thinking, when will it be my turn?
I'm Eric Marcus, and this is Making Gay History, the Nazi era. During the Nazis' reign, 100,000 German men were arrested under the anti-gay law, paragraph 175. More than half were convicted, and most were sent to regular prisons. But between 7,000 and 10,000 gay men, like Walter Schwarze, were sent to concentration camps, camps that were ruthlessly administered by the SS, the Nazis' notorious paramilitary organization. In this episode, life in the concentration camps, and later, a glimpse into the experiences of LGBTQ people in Nazi-occupied countries during the war. The earliest known account by a concentration camp survivor who was persecuted for his homosexuality comes from Leo Klassen, a gay German doctor. Klassen was in his early 30s when he was imprisoned by the Nazis in Sachsenhausen, the same concentration camp as Walter Schwarze. In the mid-1950s, he chronicled his experiences in Humanitas, a West German homophile magazine.
Ours was a barracks like the others, only this one was isolated, surrounded by a high wooden fence. Above the entrance to the barracks, a colorful sign was put up to complete the measure of mockery. On it was written, "Welcome."
Klassen then describes the lethal conditions of the brick factory where homosexuals were forced to work in the clay pit, or, as it was known among prisoners, the death pit.
The suffering that now began for us was immeasurable and unimaginable. I cannot recall any other instance of human savagery in the history of mankind that has left such terrible traces of blood and tears as this. Clinker, the brick factory. Within 2 months of this work detail, our penal company had shrunk to 1/3 of its people. Killed, shot, hanged, drowned, starved to death. Shooting those trying to escape was a profitable daily game for the guards. For each headshot, they were given 5 marks and 3 days special leave. Some managed several hits a day. There were also 2 jackals in human form among us who were our capos. They were the henchmen of death and enjoyed themselves, gleefully growing a fat stomach at the expense of the dying.
It's always some big stomach, fupa swinging, dirty kneed, knock-kneed, Tonka truck, Ford tough built, Mucinex mascot, damn keloid, bean-shaped ass individuals who always into some evil, heinous shit like this.
Bread and death. Those were the 2 pillars of our existence. We had nothing else we could hold on to. Anything beyond that, and what we once called life was far, far away, and nothing but the smell of blood and decay, of torment and meanness, surrounded us here. And we dragged ourselves from one gray morning to the next under a crown of thorns with rattling bones, and never again did it get light. One morning, when I had reached a body weight of 86 pounds, a guard said, "Well, have you made up your mind yet? Do you want to cross over? I'm a perfect shot, and it doesn't hurt either, so come on. Just one step over the guard line, and you're saved."
Homosexuals as a group were not slated for total annihilation by the Nazis, like Jews and Roma and Sinti. The official view was that what needed eradicating was the homosexual lifestyle. By the Nazis' twisted logic, if the Aryan homosexual male could be made to give up his degenerate ways, there was still a place for him in the racially unified community of the German people.
If he was Aryan.
But in reality, the savagery of the Nazis' methods to cure or re-educate these men often proved lethal. Thousands of gay men died in the camps, usually during the first year of their incarceration. The so-called 175ers died as many other prisoners did, from forced labor, inadequate rations, disease, and injury, often as a result of torture, from suicide or the homicidal whims of the SS. But the SS often assigned them to even harder work details and gave them even less food, believing that it would toughen them up and make them more manly. It was the kind of conversion therapy that, for many, ended in death. Other efforts to stamp out homosexuality included forcing 175ers to have sex with female prisoners who'd been condemned to work the camp brothels. Danish doctor Carl Vernet claimed he could cure gay men by implanting an artificial gland under their skin that released testosterone. Under Nazi leader Heinrich Himmler's direction, a dozen prisoners at Buchenwald were subjected to the experiment. 2 died. We don't know the fates of the other 10. A more common attempt at curing men of their homosexuality involved coercing prisoners to submit to so-called voluntary sterilization or castration. Josef Kohut was a Viennese man who spent nearly 5.5 years in concentration camps because of his homosexuality. In a 1990 interview, he described how an SS officer in Flossenburg put pressure on him to get castrated.
A Sturmbahnführer was.
He was a Sturmbannführer, and he called me in a few times, and it came up that homosexuals should be castrated. And I went in to see him, and he said to me, "Well, you gay pig, haven't you gotten yourself castrated yet?" I said, "No, and I'm not going to have it done either. I'll come out the same way I came in."
Once the Nazis standardized their prisoner classification system across concentration camps, most of the 175ers were forced to wear an inverted pink triangle badge on their camp uniform. The pink triangle may later have been reclaimed as a symbol of LGBTQ resistance and pride, but in the camps, it was a magnet for the scorn and hatred of the SS. In a system that was violent and dehumanizing for all inmates, there were special indignities reserved for prisoners with the pink triangle. In camps like Sachsenhausen, for example, pink triangle prisoners were isolated and subjected to inhumane scrutiny. Josef Kohut gave an account of this treatment in Heinz Hager's 1972 book, The Men with the Pink Triangle.
Our block was occupied only by homosexuals. We could only sleep in our nightshirts and had to keep our hands outside the blankets. "You queer assholes aren't going to start jerking off here." The windows had a centimeter of ice on them. Anyone found with his underclothes on in bed or his hands under his blanket, there were checks almost every night, was taken outside and had several bowls of water poured over him before being
sick,
left standing
twisted ass
outside
shit
for a good hour. Only a few people survived this treatment. The least result was bronchitis, and it was rare for any gay person taken into the sickbay to come out alive. We who wore the pink triangle were prioritized for medical experiments, and these generally ended in death. For my part, therefore, I took every care I could not to offend against the regulations.
SS officers also took pleasure in devising creative ways to degrade Pink Triangle prisoners. In the Auschwitz concentration camp, Jewish survivor Kitty Fisher witnessed the depths of humiliation gay men had to endure when, one day in 1944, she was caught in a humiliating situation herself.
A latrine is a long row of holes in the ground, one against the other. That's what latrines are. They were full of muck and shit and vomit, and I thought, I am not sitting in this dreck when my mother taught me you never sit on other people's toilet. And I crouched, and they caught me from the back with a stick, and I had a terrible pain, and I fell into the latrine. So I was full of shit, no paper, no underwear, stark naked. And suddenly I saw a striped trousers walking towards me and big wooden clogs. And it was a man, and I looked for the Star of David, and he had a big pink triangle and the number, and he carried a bucket, and he carried a brush. And he said in a very beautiful German, not in Yiddish, hurry, hurry, get up, I have work to do. I said, I can't. I am so ashamed. What is this? And I looked at this pink triangle, and he said to me, I'm gay. Ich bin schwul. But did I know what schwul was? I said, is that a religion? He said, no, I'm a homosexual. So I still didn't know, and he explained to me that with his partner, he lived in Munich, and the Gestapo under paragraph 175, which was for perversion, broke into the flat. The partner went to Dachau. He came to Auschwitz in 1940, 4 years before I met him. And a German, a non-Jew, and because he was not a Jew, they asked him sarcastically when they shaved him and put on the pyjama, what is your profession? He said, I'm an academic portrait painter from Munich. We have just the right thing for you. And they took him to a laundry and gave him a bucket with whitewash and a brush. And since 1940, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, he had to brush the shit of the latrine so that he shouldn't come out of experience with his brush. And that's what Germans did to Germans.
Pink Triangle prisoners weren't just scorned by the SS, but also by their fellow inmates, who upheld a blatant double standard when it came to same-sex behavior. As Josef Kohut noted, they reviled the 175ers as, quote, filthy queers, but they took a far more tolerant view of inmates from different prisoner groups who coerced more vulnerable men into sex. They were seen as straight men who engaged in homosexual behavior only because they didn't have access to women to satisfy their natural urges. Sexual coercion, and often violence, was rife in the camps. The SS created a hierarchy that put prisoners in charge of other prisoners in exchange for privileges, like better food and accommodations, and lighter work. Kapos, for example, supervised the labor details, block elders oversaw the barracks. Pink Triangle inmates almost never got these jobs. Most often, it was the Green Triangle prisoners, the criminals, who were elevated to the rank of capo or block elder. Many took advantage of their position of power to take a young lover, or a pipple, as they were often called.
Now listen to this shit. As much as these hoes sit up here and talk about how the gays is over here just abusing the children and stuff like that, the actual perverts, the actual child abusers, are the ones in positions of power who ended up fucking on some of these little ass boys and teenagers and shit in the camp. That's why I say a lot of these extremely homophobic ass people, they be telling on themselves, because I gotta believe that they are the ones that are doing this sick, twisted, insidious, nefarious ass shit. And when they're done with it and the guilt and shame hit their ass, now they gotta project it onto someone else as opposed to deal with it. Listen to this shit.
These prisoners, typically young teenagers, received privileges in turn: better rations, less strenuous work assignments, and protection. Gerald Rosenstein, a gay German Jew, was deported from the Netherlands with his family in 1940. They were taken to Auschwitz, where men and women were immediately separated from each other. He and his father were assigned to the men's barracks.
The capo and the sub-capo had a room at the beginning of the barracks, separated from the rest of the barracks, a private room with running water. And the capo had all of us lined up and went through the line, and he picked me out. He said, "I need somebody to clean the cabin for me." And whether he was gay or not, I don't know, but certainly no women being present, I was picked out as a sexual object for him. And I played completely dumb. I would not have played dumb if it hadn't been for peer pressure that my father was outside waiting for me, knowing what was going on, that all the other people we were with from Holland knew why I was picked out to go in there. And my smarts turned on. I could have easily been seduced by a sardine sandwich, which was offered to me, and chocolate, which was offered to me, and I said no. And then he pointed to a big jar of Vaseline standing there. That's, you know what that is for. And I said, ich weiß das nicht. So I don't know about that. Anyway, he got tired of my stupidity and my non-cooperation and sent me back outside, which was a very good thing, because if I had acquiesced and if he would have called tired of me, I would have just been sent to the gas chamber and he would have picked up another boy. As it is, he went outside and picked himself another boy who was perhaps more cooperative. And I was let off the hook. And believe me, it was an early experience in prison smarts, so to say. You know. Today there's an expression in the prison lingo, you know, I would have been his bitch, you know, but a bitch of a 40-year-old man, a 15-year-old or 16-year-old boy. And the social shame attached to it, even in Auschwitz, Birkenau, I could not overcome.
Few young men who caught the eye of a capo managed to extricate themselves the way that Rosenstein did. Many were recruited by force. But his predicament sums up the dangers and temptations of being a pipple. On the one hand, the promise of extra food when most people were starving. On the other, the dread and revulsion of being at the mercy of a criminal more than twice his age. And the fear of being ostracized by his fellow inmates. Because there was little sympathy in the camps for a pipple, or for any prisoner seen to benefit from sexual barter, even when their survival depended on it. Suspected lesbians who ended up in the concentration camps did not have their own identifying badge. There was no specific law that criminalized lesbian behavior, so they were grouped according to the primary reason for their arrest: racial, criminal, political, or social. Most often, they ended up being assigned the red triangle of political prisoners, or the black triangle of asocials. That was a catch-all category for Roma and Sinti, as well as nonconformists, alcoholics, vagrants, and other people the Nazis considered social deviants. But that didn't mean women's sexuality, or perceived sexuality, didn't affect their fate. In 1941, Dr. Friedrich Menneke, a eugenics proponent, was tasked with selecting victims for a euthanasia campaign designed to rid concentration camps of people who were unable to work. People the Nazis referred to as ballast. He was also authorized to select able-bodied Jews he considered undesirable for other reasons. Among the Jewish women Menneke singled out at the Ravensbrück concentration camp were Henny Sherman and Mary Punier. Sherman, he noted, was a, quote, licentious lesbian. His summary of Punier's case read, married, full Jewess, very active, saucy lesbian, constantly
not saucy
frequented
lesbian
bars and exchanged intimacies in the bar. In the spring of 1942, Sherman and Punier were gassed by carbon monoxide.
Wow.
Homophobia in the camps didn't just extend to 175ers. In survivor testimonies recorded after the war, lesbians or women suspected of engaging in same-sex behavior are generally described with contempt too, or with befuddled judgment, as in this clip from a Jewish camp survivor from Poland.
Because of the unusual circumstances, do you think that any of the women in your block had sexual relationships with each other? Was that anything you saw?
I didn't saw. I saw lesbians. I heard lesbians doing it, and we didn't know what lesbian is. And I said, what are they doing there? So they said, don't you know? They'll make love. And I said, what love? I don't know, a woman with a woman. And they said they're lesbians. So, because it was a lot of German lesbians too, you know. But they were Czechoslovakian, and they lived on top of me, and I hear them.
As far as this survivor was concerned, lesbian activity was something only women from other countries engaged in. The Germans and Czechoslovakians, not her fellow Poles. But in the camps, where people's physical and spiritual survival hung by a thread, queer experiences were more prevalent and meaningful than most survivor testimonies acknowledge. Arthur Olo, a Belgian socialist resistance fighter who survived the Mauthausen and Dachau concentration camps, provided a rare, non-judgmental insight into this.
I didn't engage in homosexual activity, but I was on the verge. Yes, of course. Why? Because it's the most natural thing in the world. First of all, there are no women. Second, there's not only the physical need, that's not the only thing that comes into play, but the need for comfort, the need for friendship, the need for human...
Thank you, the humanity part that unfortunately these people believe that queer people don't have, that we don't possess, that we're just created to be deviants and to spread that deviancy. Meanwhile, the motherfuckers that spread deviancies are the ones that created this whole shit to use against the queer people and the German people. The undesirables of society.
Yes, of course. That brought me to the verge of homosexuality. We caught ourselves, my friend and I, laughing, and that's as far as it went. But I understood perfectly, going through it myself and coming so close, well, I understood why for others it went much further. That's what you have to realize. The concentration camp, with a few exceptions, was a place where you were put for the rest of your days. There was no reason to think you'd ever get out alive.
Many inmates, regardless of their sexual orientation, sought relief from the everyday despair through affection or sexual intimacy with others. For Ovida Delect, it was her sense of self and her imagination that carried her through. Delect was a French resistance fighter assigned male at birth. She didn't start living her life as a woman until the early 1980s. But while she was incarcerated at the Neuengamme concentration camp as a political prisoner, it was her innate understanding of herself as a woman that served as a beacon. In her memoir, she wrote about retreating into a dream world to reanimate that pearl of femininity inside of her.
As for me, I'm convinced that what saved me is my feminine essence. After working for 14 or 15 hours, walking or running back and forth between the camp and the worksite, roll calls upon roll calls, endlessly waiting in fog or rain squall or snowstorm or under a scorching sun, after lining up for soup and 1,000 other hellish things, I'd come back to my block with my head done in from the yelling, my eyes full of sneering images, my body often black and blue. I was in a state of shock or severe agitation. I'd bury my head in my coarse, filthy sleeves and try to recover. It wasn't always easy, but I'd managed to seal my shell from breaths and drafts, noisy coughs and shouts, my neighbor's bony limbs and sharp elbows, murky smells, and above all, the whole hellish atmosphere of our day-to-day life. This way, I would give this pearl a new lease on life, a frail rebirth in which its little flame could sputter brighter than brighter. I would pull on skirts in wide expanses of freedom and fleetingness, in protective forests, meadows dotted with daisies and primroses, houses that were so very warm. I would be a hostess, an assistant, a fiancée, a little bride, a ballerina, a fashion model for stunning long dresses, a nurse, a mother, a schoolteacher, a poetess, a musician, a healer. I would dance in velvety muslin, elusive taffeta, layers of quivering gauze. I would swish against eddies of satin and caresses of tulle. I would be a caryatid of silk in motion. Nothing was too beautiful. And my reality wasn't snuffed out. It was kindled, in fact, by contradiction. I made a woman with my pain, with my soul, and I dreamed. I did more than dream. My pain and my soul, they were my real life. So I prevailed over the pervasive death. Not only life being ended, but also being reduced to base instinct, stagnation, hopeless apathy. Femininity was not only an oasis, a wellspring, a rediscovery for me of depths. It was also my way up and out, beyond the watchtowers, into the blue and its stars. And it was a sheltered space that made the company of others feel possible again.
Wow. We almost done, y'all.
Most Pink Triangle prisoners in the camps were German men, or men who were considered German, like the Austrians, whose homeland had been annexed by the Nazis in 1938. In general, no one else wore the Pink Triangle. After all, homosexuality was viewed primarily as a threat to the strength and growth of the German national community. That preoccupation was also reflected in the Nazis' policies toward homosexuals in countries they occupied during the war. In Poland, for example, gay men were at risk if they seduced German men, but sex among Polish men was not the Nazis' concern. As a 1942 Gestapo memorandum stated, quote, "It is not necessary to bring to court Poles who have sexual intercourse with Polish men. Rather, they must be evicted and transported to an area where their activities present no danger to Germandom." The Poles would never join the Germandom. Their Slavic blood was considered inferior, and once the war was won by the Nazis, Poland was to become a slave state. The Dutch, with their superior Nordic blood, were considered worthy of becoming an integral part of a future Greater Germany. And shortly after the Nazis invaded the Netherlands, they introduced a law modeled on paragraph 175. Tiemann Hoffman was a teenager when he was arrested in a hotel with an older man in the occupied Netherlands in 1941.
En plotseling toen werd er hevig op de deur werd er gebonst. Dat bleek dus de hotelhouder te zijn en die zei: "Doe open of ik trap die deur."
Suddenly, there was a loud banging on the door. It turned out to be the hotel owner, and he said, "Open up or I'll kick the door in." And that's what he did. The door immediately flew off its hinges, and there we were, with our clothes still in some disarray. The hotel owner said, "I see how it is. We got ourselves a couple of faggots here. I'm kicking you downstairs and I'm turning you over to the police." He kept on ranting and raving, and that's how we were hustled down the stairs to the tap room. In the tap room, there was a table with about 8, 10, maybe 12 Germans, and the hotel owner said something in German that I didn't quite understand. The Germans stood up, took their rifles, attached bayonets to them, and just like that, we were surrounded. I couldn't move in any direction, and of course I was terrified. All I heard was that the hotel owner said, "They are Schwulen," faggots. Then, 2 police officers arrived, and one of them handcuffed me to him. He said, "If you try to draw attention outside or start a commotion or shout," he said, "look, this is a revolver." He showed the revolver, put it in his pocket, and kept pressing it up against my leg. He said, "I'll shoot you. I'm allowed to do that by the Germans because the Germans hate everything faggot.
Wow, I'm allowed to by the Germans. We gonna be hearing this, so I'm allowed to because of Christianity, because, you know, of my religious freedom. Yeah.
So it's your call. Either you come along quietly or I shoot you.
While Hoffman was in custody, Dutch police officers beat him, tortured him, and confiscated his notebook. It contained the names of other gay men in his circle.
I think it was on the third day after my arrest that they said I would have to identify my friends. And one of the police officers said, yeah, and two of those bastards you won't see again because one of them has already taken the coward's way out and hanged himself in his cell. Wow. That was Willy Bakker. A very nice guy. I think he was about 22, 23 years old, no more. And they said a hairdresser, a certain Leo, had gassed himself. They said it in a tone, laughing. They gloated over it. So I had to walk past my friends, acquaintances, and it was terrible, just terrible. They were lined up side by side, 6 or 7 men in a row, and there were no other civilians among them. It was just them lined up. They didn't have glass back then through which you could identify someone. You had to walk past them. And one by one, when the officer said, "Who's this?" I had to give their name. I walked past them, mostly with my head down, because I was ashamed. I was ashamed, and I kept thinking, I've betrayed you. Of course, that wasn't the case, but they were in that stupid notebook. That was the great misery. So I walked with my head down, and every once in a while, I briefly raised my eyes. Then I saw who it was, and I said, "Yes, that's so-and-so, and that's so-and-so, and that's so-and-so." That confrontation, it was awful, just awful.
Hoffman was 16 at the time.
Wow.
When he was temporarily released after that harrowing lineup, his mother picked him up at the police station. She gave him several beatings, and then she locked him in his room. When he was later ordered to appear in court, he went by himself. No one was there to support him. He was convicted and sent to prison for 7 months, then spent 2 years in reform schools before he was finally allowed to return home. Hoffman was particularly unlucky. Few Dutch homosexuals were arrested. Enforcement of the Dutch anti-gay law was left to the local police and was generally lax. At the time of Hoffman's 1941 arrest, the Nazis' priority lay elsewhere: the annihilation of Europe's Jews. By the time the war broke out in 1939, approximately 400,000 Jews had left Germany and Austria, whose annexation exposed Austrian Jews to the same anti-Semitic restrictions, harassment, and state-sanctioned violence that Jews in Germany experienced. Many immigrants found refuge in the U.S., Palestine, Great Britain, Central and South America, and Shanghai. But nearly 100,000 fled to other countries in Europe that were subsequently conquered by the Nazis. That's what happened to Austrian teenager Ruth Meyer, who witnessed the Nazis' takeover of her country.
Diary entry for Wednesday, October 5th, 1938, Vienna. It's early, nobody on the streets. A Jewish man, young, well-dressed, comes round the corner. 2 SS men appear. Both of them hit the Jew. He staggers, holds up his head, moves on. I, Ruth Meyer, 18 years old, now pose the following question as a human being. As a human being, I ask the world whether it should be like this. I ask why it is allowed. Why a German is permitted to hit a Jew for the simple reason that he is a German and the other man a Jew.
The writing was on the wall, and like many of their German neighbors, Austrian Jews who had the resources and connections to leave did. Meyer's mother, grandmother, and sister got visas for the UK, and in early 1939, Meyer herself made it to Norway. But in June 1940, Norway fell to Germany, As Meyer's hopes of being reunited with her family faded, she found comfort with Gunvor Hofmo, a woman she'd met in Norway's volunteer women's labor service, and she experienced their relationship with all the intensity of a great young love.
January 9th, 1941. The days are longer when you love somebody. When Gunvor is not there, something in me is missing. It is not until she reappears far away in my field of vision that I can let out a sigh of relief. She's back. September 22nd, 1941. Autumn has suddenly arrived as if overnight. Last week we were astonished as the trees were still green and the evenings still light. Now we're just as astonished because the leaves have turned totally yellow, as if overnight. The nights are now dark, and at nighttime I cannot see Gunvor when she lies beside me like a small child. In spring and summer, I saw her eyes watch me at night, so deep, so inscrutable, often so unutterably sad, too. Now I can only feel her mouth and her soft skin and hear her say, "It's so wonderful to have you lying beside me, so secure." November 22nd, 1941. Concerning loneliness, I'm no longer lonely. I have Gunvor. I've staked everything on her. And yet, sometimes I long for a man. Without Gunvor, I'd never be able to cope without a man. So this manlessness is just a gentle pain inside me.
In November 1942, Meyer was rounded up for deportation. She wrote a final note to Hofmo that was smuggled out of the ship that would carry her to mainland Europe.
I think it's just as well that it happened this way. Why shouldn't we suffer when there's so much suffering? Don't worry about me. Perhaps I wouldn't even change places with you.
Meyer and 531 other Jews were sent to the Auschwitz concentration camp. Women, children, and those who couldn't work went directly to the gas chambers on arrival and were killed. Gunvor Hofmo went on to become a celebrated poet in her native Norway and lived openly as a lesbian in a long-term relationship. How Meyer herself would have identified or how she would have lived her life had she survived the war, we'll never know. But thanks to Hofmo, who saved Meyer's diary and letters, we do know how Meyer experienced her first true love during an all-too-short life. This is how we're left to piece together the experiences of LGBTQ people during the Nazi era, through all-too-rare written accounts, through traces of queer lives in Nazi archives, and through the few recorded testimonies from those who survived. In the 8 episodes to come, you'll hear from people who shared their recollections, often in the face of stigma and shame, and made an invaluable contribution to our understanding of the lives that LGBTQ people lived during this incredibly dark chapter of history. Up next.
Listen. Again, make sure y'all go subscribe to Making Gay History Podcast, because in the words of what Boy Crazy just commented, history is important, research is necessary. That's why I encourage queer people right now in this social media age to share your stories. That's one of the purposes of why I'm sharing my story with my wonderfully made custom doc series. We are heading into a very, very dark 4 years. We are just in February and so much catastrophic shit has been signed through executive orders. And those things eventually will be implemented. Especially if the people the real people, which are the individuals who are part of humanity, who are aware of it, the global citizenry. If we don't make a change, the next generation and the generations after us will have to continue to fight the same fucking fight. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm sick and tired of fighting the same fight that my father fought, my grandfather, my great-great-grandfather. This is the time for us to be living and thriving. And what I want y'all to understand and never fucking forget is that you don't need nail motherfuckers agreement to be yourself. You don't need their permission. That's the word I was looking for. To be you. God, source, universe, consciousness has allowed for you to come into this experience. The all-knowing, all-seeing thing, right? The beginning and the end and everything in between, and in all the infinite realities and parallel universes and multiverses, knows who you are. And in this world and then in this era, there are going to be only two types of people. People who know who they are and people who don't. And all I'm going to ask in closing is that you find out and you figure out what type of person your ass is. Okay? So with that being said, I ask that y'all please like the live. Please, it helps this channel to grow in the algorithms. We are at 841 subscribers. We are climbing. Thanks to y'all. I appreciate y'all and y'all consistency with me. If you like the vibe over here on BubzDaGawd, even though it can get scary at times, jarring at times, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you can stay up to date with all of my edited content as well as my lives. If there's anything that I've said in this live that touched and agreed with your spirit and you want to share that in other spaces or even on your own social media platform, I ask that you please screen record it and tag me in it so I know that it's real. And if you feel compelled, you can definitely hit me up in the Cash App at the bottom of the screen, $BubzDaGawd. Okay? Again, make sure y'all go support Making Gay History Podcast. If you can donate, please donate to them. Because there's going to be channels like that are going to be imperative for us. Those stories that we heard, somebody cares about them. Just like how there are people in this world that care about each and every one of y'all's stories. So share them so that we can never, ever truly be erased. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all Sunday evening. And I'll be talking to y'all. Peace.
I can be anything I choose in this round. We are a sound vibration too deep to tell.